Thank you. I hate introductions. I got shell-shocked at an introduction in 1991, and I'm still not over it. Right after college, I was signed to a record label called Delicious Vinyl. And Delicious Vinyl had two huge acts at the time. One was a guy named Tone Loc, who had a song called Wild Thing, you're nodding, yes, and Funky Cold Medina. And there was another artist on the label named Young MC who won a Grammy for his song called Bust a Move. And I was the next artist signed to Delicious Vinyl. And I got a call one day from the owner of the record company who said that they're having this huge concert in Atlanta, Georgia, where I live, at the Georgia Dome, and they're busing in 36,000 inner city kids from all over the state of Georgia for this concert that they were coining the Increase the Peace concert. So they were going to have black artists and white artists come together in this community bonding concert. Well, the day before the concert, I think Vanilla Ice canceled, and they needed a white rapper, and they volunteered me to be the white act at the event. So I get a plane ticket, and I fly down to Atlanta, and when I get there, immediately I recognize, like, the place is unruly, like really unruly. There's fist fights going on in the stands, and they're putting the house lights on to control the crowd, and there's police everywhere, and the kids are booing every single act that came on stage. They're booing them right off the stage. So the first guy up, I think, was LL Cool J in his prime. They boo him right off the stage. I'm sitting over here in the green room, about to go on next to sing my song called Shake It Like a White Girl. So I called my mother, like 21 years old. I called my mother. I said, Mom, I got a really big problem, man. They're booing the best artists off the stage. Like, they're booing them off the stage. She said, Sweetie, just be yourself. They're going to love you. Doesn't work like that. So the MC gets up. He's like, ladies and gentlemen, all the way from California, give it up for my main man, Jesse James, which was my stage name. Don't Google it. The crowd is silent. I'm about to come on stage, and I'm looking at the audience, and the kids are pissed off. I'm holding the mic like I'm there. The kids are pissed off. That's how real this is to me. The kids are pissed off that I'm coming on stage. And I had some T-shirts that the record company gave me, like promotional T-shirts, so I bring them on stage. I'm like, does this section over here want some free T-shirts? The kids go crazy. I throw them out. You guys over here, you want some T-shirts? They go nuts. I throw them out. Middle section, you want some T-shirts? I throw them out. I said, thank you guys very much. Salt and Pepper's up next. And I got the hell out of there. Still not over that introduction years later. I got one of the best compliments I ever got in my life last week from a friend of mine. He came over to me, he said, Jess, you're one of the happiest people I ever met. And I was like, man, thank you so much. That means so much to me. Thank you so much. And then when he walked away, I'm like, how in the world does he know how happy I am? And how do you even measure your own personal happiness? Like, what if there was a way that we could measure at any given moment, take inventory on how happy each of us individually actually were? And it's brought me back to my childhood. My first job, believe it or not, was as a break dancer. I grew up in New York in the early 1980s when breakdancing was emerging on the scene. And I thought to myself one day, like, there's no way the kids in Washington, D.C. could possibly be as good as the breakdancers from New York. Like, we invented this stuff. So I had this idea, like, why don't I go to D.C. and try to make money in Washington, D.C.? Like, the competition won't be as fierce. So I called up my friend Myron, who was part of my two-man crew, and I convinced my sister, who just got her driver's license, to drive us down to Washington, D.C. So we get in the car, and we start driving the 4 hours down to Washington, D.C., and we show up in Georgetown, and we find a bank with a big parking lot. And I take out my boom box. I have my boom box, and I put my boom box down in the corner of the parking lot. I tilt my hat to the side, and I push play on the boom box, and the music starts playing, and I start going through my thing, and I pass it over to Myron, and he spins on his back, flips over, spins on his head, then he passes it over to me, and I start breakdancing, and a crowd comes. This big crowd forms. Now we have their attention, like, this is working. And I take off my hat, and I go around to the crowd, and I start collecting all the money from people there, and at the end of the day, we collect $213. And I give my sister the money that she invested to drive us down, the gas money, and we split up money for food, and at the end of the day, we have $82, $41 each. And Myron starts counting the money. He's counting the money, puts it in his pocket, then he takes it back out. He starts recounting the money, and he stuffs it into his pocket. We're 15 years old, and with his huge eyes lit up, he looks at me, and he takes a running bear hug, and he squeezes me, and he goes, "Jess, we're so damn rich." Fast forward 20 years. I started a private jet company called Marquis Jet. And I'm looking for my very first customer ever. I need my first sale, and I'm struggling. I don't know anyone that's rich that can afford time on an airplane. So I heard about the only way that I could really find qualified leads, like I didn't have a sophisticated way to bring in leads at the time. I had to go to where people that could afford to buy time on a plane were. And I heard about a conference in Monterey, California called TED. And I got on an airplane from New York, it was to California, rented a car, drove 5 hours to Monterey, California, and I show up at the TED conference. And when I get there, I immediately realized, like, nobody told me that you need a credential to get into the TED conference. It's like Fort Knox there. Like, I can't get anywhere near the conference. So I go to the local coffee shop right next to where the conference was. And as I'm sitting there trying to map out my strategy, like how am I going to get someone's attention to try to sell them into our program, I realized that about every hour, people are coming in with credentials and they're buying lattes and muffins. Lattes and muffins. So I go back to my hotel, and the next day at 5 a.m., I'm the first one at the coffee shop. And as soon as they open, I buy every single muffin that they have. I take them out of all their inventory. I now control all the muffin inventory in Monterey, California. I put them in my bag, and I keep one muffin on my table. I start reading the newspaper. Sure enough, at the first break of the TED conference, people with credentials start invading the coffee shop. And sure enough, one of the first customers comes in, and he says, "I like a latte and a muffin." They say, "Oh, you can have the latte, but I'm sorry, we're all out of muffins." He's like, "Oh." And as he's walking out, I said, "I'm sorry, sir. I overheard you having a conversation, and it just so happens I have an extra muffin. I'm not going to have it." He says, "Really?" I said, now I'm staring right at his credential. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, no, really." He said, "Oh, that's so nice." He said, "Well, what do you do?" I said, "Oh, well, I'm here for the conference, and I have a company called Marquis Jet. We sell time on private jets." He said, "No way. I'm actually looking into programs like that. I'm interested in that." And he said, "Do you mind if I join you and have a muffin?" And I'm looking at this guy, and in my head I'm saying, "Absolutely, Mr. Qualified." Like, of course you can. And I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So we start to have a muffin, and we're enjoying our time. I'm explaining the program, and he becomes the first sale that I ever have at a company that goes on to do $5 billion in cumulative sales. And we sell that company one day to Warren Buffett's NetJets. But when we sold the company, I was no more happy than the 15-year-old kid that made $41 and had $41 in his pocket. And it made me think, like, it weighed the same. They both weighed the same, and it got me thinking, like, how do you measure happiness? So for me, obviously, it wasn't money, but how do you measure happiness? And what if there was a simple way that you could identify at any given time really how happy you are? Take real inventory in your life and identify how happy you are, but more importantly, identify what it is in your life that makes you unhappy so you can correct it. So I came up with a very simple metrics, and we're all going to do this. It's going to be a group experiment. It's called the happiness meter. It's super effective, and the results are unbelievable. They're astounding. So here's how it works. I want everybody here, everyone's going to do it, to think about all the different buckets of your life. Your wealth, your health, your relationships, your kids, where you live, the job that you have, your parents are getting elderly, we're getting older, everything. And put it in a giant blender, okay? And on a scale of 1 to 10, with a 10 being the Dalai Lama of happiness, and a 1 being someone that's rock bottom, think about your number. I'll give you guys a second. Really, honestly, really take inventory and really think about it. We have any volunteers want to share their number? We don't have to. Oh, you're just scratching? It's like a Bud Light commercial. Anybody? Oh, we'll do it this way. We'll do it this way, just by a show of hands. Everybody that's a 7 or less, put your hand up. Quite a few people, right? Okay, put your hands down. Well, here's what happens. A lot of people put their hand up. 7's a common number. And for most people, 7's a great number. If my son comes home from school with a 70 on his test, that's a C- in the most important bucket of your life. But the way the test works is, what's amazing about this test and why it's so efficient, is as soon as we do this experiment, your brain goes to a 10. Immediately it goes to a 10, right? Everyone went to a 10. And the 2 or 3 things that are impacting your life negatively pop into your head. Like, oh, my relationship is terrible. Oh, I'm running out of money. Whatever it is pops into your head. So whatever it was that popped into your head right away, those are the 2, 3 things that you have to work on. And here's why it's so important. The average American, on average, lives to be about 78 years old. I'm not saying anyone here is average. I hope I'm not average. That's 28,470 days. Okay, I'm 49 years old. That means if I'm average, I have 29 years left of life. If I'm a 7 and I'm walking around life living as a C- in the most important bucket of my life, happiness, that is unacceptable. It's unacceptable. I have a quick drink here. I'm a little like the Georgia sun. That's unacceptable. We have a way to measure so many of the different buckets of our life. For example, we get on a scale to measure our weight. We have an IQ test to measure how intelligent we are. We have financial statements and bank accounts and tax brackets to measure our wealth. But we don't invest any time really looking at our happiness. We can get on a scale every single day and say, oh man, and be upset. We gained a pound. We lost a pound. But we really don't take inventory on our happiness. So this little take-it-home test, which takes 30 seconds to do, forget going to the doctor and reading all this little test really helped me identify what it is I have to work on in my life. And of course, I'm investing the time to do it. So if you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Thank you, guys.